For 100 years, one single American oil company has managed to ride out coups, nationalizations, a total economic collapse, and wave after wave of sanctions, all to stay in a country that's sitting on the largest oil reserves on planet Earth. This is the incredible story of Chevron in Venezuela, how they became the last oil giant standing.
So let's get right into it, because this is a fascinating story. It's all about geopolitics, high-stakes diplomacy, and a corporate strategy that was all about playing the long game when literally everyone else just packed up and left. We're going to break down exactly how Chevron managed to pull this off when all its rivals bailed. And believe me, this isn't just some dusty old history lesson. Right now, as we speak, there are talks happening between Chevron and Washington that could completely redraw the global energy map. We're talking about potentially unlocking a massive supply of Venezuelan oil for the first time in years. And that quote right there, it just lays bare the massive scale of this situation. I mean, Venezuela's oil industry, it's a ghost of its former self. The infrastructure is completely, totally broken. But the prize for fixing it is so huge that it's right at the center of U.S. foreign policy. So what is this prize exactly? To really get why Chevron has held on for so long, you first have to wrap your head around the sheer, almost mind-boggling scale of the resources we're talking about here. 300 billion. Just let that number sink in. That's the number of proven oil barrels just sitting under Venezuela. And get this, a lot of people think that's a low estimate. The U.S. Geological Survey, they think there could be over 1 trillion barrels in the ground. That's enough oil to maybe outlast the entire world's demand for it. It's just staggering. Now, this chart really puts that number in perspective. Venezuela is sitting on about 17% of all the known oil in the entire world. If you're an energy company, this isn't just a prize. It is the ultimate prize. But of course, there's a massive catch. This isn't the light, easy-to-get crude you find in places like Saudi Arabia. Nope. Venezuelan oil is thick, it's sludgy. Think of it like tar. Getting it out of the ground is incredibly difficult. You need a ton of money and super specialized expertise, the kind of know-how that really only a few big global oil companies have. And all of this leads to this critical turning point back in the early 2000s, when a huge political shift forced every single foreign oil company to make a choice that would end up defining their future for decades to come. So, after decades as a global oil powerhouse, Venezuela elects Hugo Chavez in 1998. And he moved fast to take state control. He passed new laws that basically forced all oil projects to become joint ventures, with the state-owned company, PDVSA, that's Petróleos de Venezuela, holding the majority share. For a lot of companies, that was a total deal-breaker. And this right here, this is the fork in the road. It perfectly shows the two very different paths these companies took. American giants like Exxon and Conoco, they said no way, packed their bags, and sued Venezuela in international court. To this day, Conoco is still owed more than $10 billion. But Chevron, well, Chevron did something completely different. They stayed. So the key thing to understand is this wasn't some kind of accident. It was a very deliberate strategic move. It was led by their head of Latin American operations, a guy named Ali Moshiri. And he actually forged a strong personal relationship with Hugo Chavez himself. Chevron agreed to the new terms, basically deciding that just keeping a foot in the door was way more valuable than winning a short-term fight. But staying put? That was just the first challenge. The years that followed were pure chaos. Venezuela fell into an economic death spiral, making it one of the toughest places on earth to do business. After Chavez's death in 2013, the country's economy, which was already being badly mismanaged, just completely collapsed under his successor, Nicolás Maduro. It spiraled into a period of absolutely devastating hyperinflation. And to get a real sense of what that feels like for everyday people, check out Bloomberg's Café con Leche Index. It tracks the price of a single cup of coffee. That price went up by nearly 600% in just 1 year. People's life savings were just gone. And this was the chaotic environment that Chevron had to somehow keep operating in. And then came all the international pressure. The Trump administration hit Venezuela with really tough sanctions, which at one point cut Chevron's ability to export crude by 60%. Then the Biden administration shifted to more of a carrots and sticks approach, and they used Chevron as one of those carrots, giving it some leeway to try and encourage democratic reforms. And through all that, Chevron had to walk this incredibly fine political tightrope. So how in the world did they convince Washington to let them stay? Well, for years, Chevron made this very smart, very persuasive geopolitical argument. They basically said, look, if you force us out, you're just creating a vacuum. And you know who's going to fill it? America's adversaries. We're talking China and Russia. And you know what? That argument worked.
Which, finally, brings us to today. After a whole century of just hanging on, you have to ask, what is the actual payoff for this massive, incredibly high-stakes bet? On Wall Street, there's a term for this: option value. And that roulette analogy, it's perfect. It's like putting one chip on the same number year after year. You might lose and lose and lose again, but you keep that chip on the table because you know that if your number finally hits, the payout is going to be absolutely astronomical. By staying, Chevron kept its option on the world's biggest oil prize.
And what a prize it is. Analysts figure it'll take over $100 billion of investment just to get Venezuela's oil industry back to where it used to be. And with all of its major competitors gone for years, Chevron is now sitting in the pole position to lead that entire revival. But here's the reality check. The potential is only matched by the massive challenges. Chevron itself says it could boost production by 50% in just 2 years. That's huge. But to do that, you have to navigate a deeply unstable political climate, you have to rebuild all that broken infrastructure from scratch, and you have to commit to investing something like $10 billion a year for a decade. So you see, while Chevron might have won the long game of just staying in Venezuela, it's pretty clear that the next phase of this whole game is just beginning. And honestly, the outcome is anything but certain. The reality on the ground is still incredibly difficult. You've got political instability, rampant crime, huge environmental liabilities. These are just some of the enormous hurdles standing in the way. It is still a very, very tough place to be. And all of this leaves us with the ultimate question. After 100 years of waiting, of navigating unimaginable chaos, is Chevron's epic bet finally about to deliver a historic payoff? Or, in a country as complicated as Venezuela, is the real game just getting started?